Welcome back to the Prepper News. This is your World War III update. Here I give you the unadulterated facts, analysis, and speculations that you need to be ahead of the information curve, and I guarantee you, you're not going to hear this anywhere else. Confirmed reports out of Israel are suggesting that that country is currently undertaking extensive preparations for a retaliatory strike by Iran. What might Iran be retaliating for, might you ask? Retaliating for the long-anticipated and vaunted Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear facilities, also known as the U.S. strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. Now, you might say, Nate, wait a minute, didn't Donald Trump just say he has nothing to do with all of this? And this is, if something happens, it's purely Israel's fault and we didn't have anything to do with it. Isn't that what we are being told? Isn't that what this Oscar award-winning deception would lead us to believe? Well, before I get into the facts of why this strike might be imminent before June 6th, and that is according to multiple sources. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but these sources are indicating that there's a very strong possibility. In fact, Iran has issued a notice to airmen in multiple areas suggesting that they might be already getting ready for the retaliation to said attack. We're going to talk about the details of those preparations that are being made and the geopolitics that surround the issue. But I want people to understand three things so that you don't succumb to this deception being perpetrated right now in the media. Understand that if it were true that Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu were at odds around the issue of striking Iran, number one, Donald Trump would immediately stop the flow of weapons to Israel. Has he done that? No. Number two would be Marco Rubio today probably wouldn't have come out and said, hey, if you criticize Israel, and it's such a broad and vague definition, if you criticize Israel at all, you're not getting into the country. But wait a minute. If you criticize the U.S., can you still get into the country? So where's the primacy here with respect to the censorship? Anyways, probably wouldn't have done those two things. But lastly, and most important of all, and this is how you know it is 100% bullshit that these guys are just playing this up so that when Israel does strike Iran, the U.S. has plausible deniability, then they can come to Israel's defense. All Trump has to say is that Israel, if you strike Iran and Iran strikes you back, we are not going to come to your defense. That's all they have to say. He can say, we're going to pull out those THAAD systems, those missile defense systems, and you're going to be on your own. That's all he has to do. Has he done that yet? No. Has he stopped supplying intelligence and weaponry to the Ukrainians? No. In fact, that situation gets worse by the day. So those are the three fundamental reasons. But there's maybe a fourth reason, and this one is with respect to diplomatic etiquette. Here is what Trump has to say whilst in negotiations, presumably with Iran. What we got going on here? Audio issues. Of course. Don't got those communists around to help me out.
We have a chance of that, and I think we have a chance of making a deal with Iran also. They don't want to be blown up. They would rather...
Okay, just listen to that again, okay?
...of making a deal with Iran also. They don't want to be blown up. They would rather make a deal. And
you know, it's just so imprudent to say that when you're in negotiations. Now, we all understand this is Trump's way of expressing himself, and people probably don't take it that seriously. But could you ever imagine, even Vladimir Putin at this stage of the game with Zelensky would not use such combative and juvenile language when engaged in negotiations, when you're not even in a war with a country yet, threatening to blow them up, okay? At least Vlad has the decorum in order to express himself in the usual political legalese that people expect in that realm of diplomatic exchange. But Trump just outright says they don't want to get blown up. So anyways, this is all nonsense. Okay, so I just wanted to I highlight that because, you know, these guys are not taking this situation seriously at all. At least Trump isn't, because I really don't think he's the one steering the ship here with respect to this particular issue. Now, according to a Knesset source who informed Balaz, the Knesset is the Israeli legislature. Balaz is a Israeli news publication. Now, before I provide this information to you, we must at least entertain the notion that this is just Israeli propaganda to posture in an attempt to try to force the Iranians' hand in negotiations. But I don't think it is, because the Iranians haven't responded to this yet. I doubt they will at this point. I think this is actually for real. According to a Knesset source who's informed Balaz, an Israeli news publication, that an Israeli strike on Iran is likely to take place during Shavuos. I believe this is a Israeli holiday to commemorate the giving of the Torah to the Israelites on Mount Sinai or something to that effect. Anyways, multiple Israeli government departments held covert meetings to plan a potential Israeli strike on Iran and to prepare for possible Iranian retaliation. Now, the strike plan has been something they've been working on for a long time. Whether or not it is going to be successful is anybody's best guess. Of course, they did those standoff strikes last year that they claim were successful, but we wouldn't know because there really is no satellite data to confirm that there was significant amounts of damage done. Certainly not the entire air defense system of Iran, which is just a preposterous suggestion that they actually expect people to believe. That demonstrates the hubris of this particular administration. Now, according to Ynet, which is a prominent Israeli newspaper, they estimate that an attack on Iran would lead to an intense round of fighting. It is believed that it will lead to Iran launching thousands of missiles at Israel. So not just hundreds, as we've seen during True Promise 2, but thousands. And remember, despite what our media claim that most of those missiles were shot down, which is just one of the most, what do you call it? Not doublespeak, but you know, that, or there's an Orwellian terminology for it, where you can see what's happening with your eyes and they're saying something that completely contradicts it, which triggers cognitive dissonance people, and they just basically say, okay, well, maybe we did shoot them all down, even though you can clearly see hundreds of these missiles raining down, hitting their targets within the general vicinity, and not being stopped by the vaunted Iron Dome. Now, the Israeli economy would be paralyzed within 2 to 4 days, they claim. Because remember, I believe Israel gets most of its stuff from one main port. Now, of course, they've made inroads in Syria, and they've, to a certain extent or another, alleviated the threat of Hezbollah in the southern part of Lebanon. And of course, they have Egypt on the other side. So there are other pathways. They're starting to get a handle on things in their immediate region, but nonetheless, they're wholly dependent on the outside world for resupply, especially with respect to weapons. They're currently preparing for potential war by planning to open over 10,000 public bomb shelters and increase hospital capacity. Now, this is something that is pretty standard fare for Israel, seeing that they've been at war for at least 18 months now and been in some sort of moderate intensity state of conflict for many years. They're currently in the process of stockpiling food supplies. A source familiar with the matter has told Balaz, which is that Israeli news publication, that the IDF has recently begun renting numerous ambulances for its home front command, anticipating that Iran could respond to such a strike with missile attacks on Israel lasting up to 10 days, okay? Food supplies have been stockpiled in underground government war bunkers located at the entrance to Jerusalem, which Prime Minister Netanyahu visited recently. Iran has issued a notice to airmen announcing temporary airspace closures around Tehran on June 1st and June 2nd of 2025 due to planned rocket launches and drone activities. So this particular NOTAMs is not necessarily directly related, although they claim that this was planned, but it's hard to say, right? This could be the Iranian way of posturing back at the Israelis, warning them that indeed we can escalate this thing as well. Of course, if Israel does feel like they are existentially threatened by these thousands of missiles, then they will utilize their Samson option, which is the U.S. Samson option, because the U.S. and Israel are one and the same thing. Essentially, you can't criticize them, and the U.S. has not reneged on its promise to support Israel should Iran attack them. So that's all you need to know, right? This whole thing about Trump being at odds, Netanyahu, completely fake. According to the Iranian military and Fars, which is a major publication in Iran, they're warning that Trump's threat to destroy nuclear sites crosses a red line. And notice how they are referring to Trump here, knowing full well not falling for this bait that suggests that Israel and the United States are somehow on opposite ends of the spectrum. Will have severe consequences, he claims. The official says it's openly hostile against Iran's national interests. Well, duh. Urges U.S. to drop the threats and sanctions for diplomacy. Now, how are those sanctions relief coming along? The Iranians are demanding essentially the removal of all sanctions, okay? Now, if Iran has the boot heel taken off its throat and has all of these sanctions removed, that's actually more problematic for Israel, I would say, than them immediately having access to a nuclear weapon, because their economy would rocket to new highs that would likely see them in the top 10 economies in the world within just a few years. This is the problem when you have a nation who is used to strife and living under austerity and finally has the world opened up to them for trade. They're going to take off like a rocket ship economically, and that's going to empower them in ways that are going to be insurmountable for the Israelis. So it's almost in Israel's interest right now to force a situation by which Iran edges closer to becoming a nuclear state beyond the threshold, thus giving the United States casus belli for war, because it is written into U.S. legislation that Iran is not allowed to have a nuclear weapon, because apparently the United States is the patriarch of the planet, the blue-haired patriarch of the planet. There's a joke for you. The JCPOA claiming breach of nuclear safeguards. Now, this is where it gets very important, so listen up. The US, UK, France, and Germany plan to submit a draft resolution at the June 9th International Atomic Energy Agency board meeting declaring Iran in breach of nuclear safeguards. So we have the UK, France, and Germany all on board with this. And remember, the Germans aren't liking the Iranians right now because the Russians are using Iranian shaheeds to attack their proxy in Ukraine, right? So this is a world war. This would be the first of such moves since 2025, and this would declare Iran in breach of nuclear safeguards and could escalate tensions and impose the snapback sanctions, and this would, of course, likely stall nuclear talks. Now, this is after the notice to airmen, and this is after that holiday I was talking about. So, but the fact that this is the intention at this point in time, and as far as I know, the Iranians are not willing to give up enrichment. They want all sanctions removed. I'm not sure if the U.S. is offering that, all sanctions to be removed. Iran has responded to this move by the former JCPOA countries. That source tells Iran News that the political pressure from 3 European countries and the United States on the IAEA is unconstructive and will be met with a proportionate response. So that doesn't bode well for finding a peaceful resolution to this problem. Trump, of course, is feigning division once again when he says that he's ordered the U.S. military to stop coordinating with Israel on a potential Iranian nuclear strike. He's telling Netanyahu to pause the attack as nuclear talks progress, but Israel just continues to prep for a possible assault, and the United States have no power over Israel whatsoever, despite all the financial aid, all the military aid, and the only reason why Israel is doing this is because the United States says that they would come to their defense when Iran attacks. So talk about a nice position to be in for Israel or Netanyahu. Literally, all he has to do at this point to get the U.S. into a war is launch an attack on Iran. If things just don't go his way in Lebanon or Syria or wherever else in the immediate region, well, it's time to bring the U.S. into this war. What do we got to do? Okay, do the thing. Launch the attack. And even if the attack fails miserably, even if it's all shot down, they'll do something egregious enough to provoke the Iranians that the Iranians have to respond in a way which is an order of magnitude, or maybe not an order of magnitude, because that would be 10 times what True Promise 2 was, but it would have to be a lot more substantial than what we've seen with True Promise 2. You're talking about casualties, and you're talking about the complete lack of forewarning. And all it's going to take is one errant missile that hits a civilian facility. That is going to be casus belli for all-out war with Israel and Iran. And Donald Trump will come to the defense of Israel because they're already banning people from coming into their own country who not criticize the United States, but criticize Israel. That's what's going down. Now, the U.S. is planning on giving Iran the following terms to comply. The United States plans to present Iran with a document outlining terms for a potential nuclear agreement, including a demand to end uranium enrichment, and this is a warning to Tehran of serious consequences if it rejects this proposal. Again, I don't know who's running the country, what the grand master plan is. Are they just playing geostrategic whack-a-mole around the world? Because at the same time that this happened, it seems like one day it's bullish news, green day, and the next day it's just a big old turd sandwich. Today was a turd sandwich day. We see the divide growing between Iran. We see hostilities mounting with Russia in this new imposition of 500% tariffs on anybody who does business with Russia. We have the admission of the United States that they recently sent more weapons to Taiwan, and that the surprise, surprise, the tariff talks aren't going so well. Well, gee, I wonder why. So shit's not looking too good this weekend. And they announced some of this stuff after the market closes for obvious reasons. But even the markets don't know what to make of this. Is it taco? Is this the real deal this time? It's what a crazy, crazy, chaotic. If Trump was trying to achieve strategic ambiguity, he is by far and away, one of the best presidents in that capacity thus far. According to a senior U.S. official, if Iran does not accept these terms, it's not going to be a good day for the Iranians. I would strongly encourage people to go and check out our interview yesterday with Professor Mohammad Marandi. Very rare person in the sense that there's not a lot of Iranians who are close to the inner circle who are conducting these sorts of media exchanges. So you're not going to hear this perspective really anywhere else. And just a great guest, a wealth of information. You might not agree with everything he has to say, but it's imperative that you get that point of view. I'm hoping to have him back on the channel so we can go into more depth about these particular issues. I'm open to interviewing anybody, so long as they're not being dictatorial with respect to their perspective, and so long as they're willing to keep somewhat of an open mind and have a conversation and not just shout at me their opinion in as bellicose manner as possible, which typically is the case when it comes to the realm of politics. For me, that's not constructive at all. That's not what we need in order to try to get a handle on what is going to happen next. If we want to know that, we have to approach these issues with a pure mind. And I'm not saying I'm not biased, but I try to view things in an eclectic way as possible so that I can, try to make the most accurate predictions possible. So as indicated, this is the notice to airmen. Now moving over to what's happening in Russia. You may have gotten tired of this issue, but Russia certainly isn't, and neither is Ukraine. Now, in the last few days, drones have become increasingly proximate to the epicenter of Moscow. As you can see here, they made it. Moscow is a massive city. They made it to the outer periphery on May 20th. They made it in here on May 26th. On May 28th, they made it in here. And it appears as though, even though Ukraine is losing record amounts of territory since the war began on a daily basis, they continue to make gains in their aviational offensive that they're waging. And their proliferation of these drones, somehow, obviously, with the support and the intelligence infrastructure of NATO, is improving by the day. So the situation is definitely escalating. In fact, the Ukrainians were able to destroy a facility that was all the way on the other side, right by North Korea. Okay, there's a Russian military base over here. Explosions rocked the Russian city of Vladivostok early on May 30th, targeting the deployment area of the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, and this is very close to the border with North Korea. Okay, now how did they do that? They obviously didn't do that with drones, although we're not too sure, but this is what appears to be almost 10,000 kilometers. Man, Russia's a huge country. So obviously this was an act of sabotage. Okay, so this was a inside job, and so you can see it there. And these types of attacks have been commonplace throughout Russia ever since the war began, but that is far and away one of the furthest from the front lines that we've seen. And as indicated yesterday, the Taurus missile system, which is a nuclear-capable system, I always forget about that. You know, I did a video on that probably a year and a half ago, that yes, you can deploy nuclear weapons on the Taurus missile. Well, when the F-16s entered the fray, we were very concerned because the Russian foreign minister himself indicated that this F-16 platform that you're about to give to Ukraine is a method of nuclear delivery. So you can deploy nuclear weapons on this platform. And so it was presumed that Russia would interpret every F-16 sortie as potentially being nuclear, and therefore have their finger hovering over the nuclear trigger, bringing us closer to escalation. And I still do believe that is the case, because as many of the F-16s have been shot down, more are still flying sorties in combat. And with the addition of these new U.S. tactical nuclear weapons, that has automatically raised the DEFCON level. If the Taurus systems enter into Russia, the Russians are saying, not officially, not Vladimir Putin yet, and he could say this, and I'm wondering why he's not saying it directly, with the exception of Shoigu, which really is one of the top guys, the former Minister of Defense, is claiming that if Germany provides Ukraine with these Taurus systems, that would mean that Germany would have to, of course, train Ukraine to use them, train in the targeting, and therefore Germany would be the one who was culpable for the attack. And thus, in retaliation, Russia would target Germany. Now, of course, that would be grounds for the invocation of Article 5, which immediately jacks up the nuclear threat level to the highest possible level. DEFCON 2 to DEFCON 1. Okay, DEFCON 1 is like, it's basically a foregone conclusion. For the most part, you know, the president is scrambling to get to the phone before the things launch. DEFCON 2 is like, maybe there's still a chance, right? That would be a DEFCON 2 situation, because Russia must presume that the other side is getting ready to launch their nukes, so they have to be ready to launch their nukes. Now, hopefully, there's enough channels of communication to prevent that sort of escalation, and hopefully people are cowardly enough, our leaders are cowardly enough that they don't want to give up their privilege that they've gained in this system, this level of technology that we've all achieved, that they don't want to forfeit that over a senseless nuclear war. Remember, AI is right around the corner. They could be trillionaires soon. So they need to keep us around a little bit longer so they can, achieve omnipotence through modding themselves and cybernetics and, becoming cosmists and all that good transhumanistic stuff. So they want to maybe postpone this. That's all we have to kind of hope for here. Anyways, getting back to the point. So right now we have Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham decide it's a great time to get ready to propose legislation to increase Russian tariffs by 500%. Okay? So these guys went to Kiev today, and you'll notice how brazen Lindsey Graham has become since Donald Trump's tone shifted. You know how he's going softer there for a while, and now the mask is completely off and the whole ship is sinking, and the whole facade of I'm going to end the war in 24 hours. Even Trump's own constituents are turning away and saying, hey, this is weird, and people who supported him up until that point are starting to become critical. Now these guys are in there war hawking around, chicken hawking around, I should say, with their feathers all puffed up and getting ready to impose 500% sanctions on any country that chooses to buy Russian oil. So this is about oil hegemony. So they want to essentially break the Europeans, because without cheap Russian energy, Europe is screwed. Okay, they don't have the solar infrastructure. They don't have nuclear. They're not like China, where they're achieving, or at least getting close to achieving, self-reliance on energy despite their lack of oil. Europe is screwed, and that is the objective, is to completely destroy Europe, sacrifice Europe, basically. And eventually, people in Europe are going to clue into that. There's been attempts to do so, but of course, usually those are squelched, and those movements are pacified and mollified before they can really metastasize. Now, Donald Trump decided today to just throw more fuel onto the fire. Because why not, right? And this is what you got to understand. They just send more, or they've just committed. They've been sending for a long time. There's U.S. troops, like just on the outskirts. There's this island where U.S. Special Forces are training the Taiwanese military, and it's an island that you could see it from China, okay? That's how close our troops are to there. I say are because, whatever, if we're not the 51st state yet, it's pretty much de facto. Anyways, Trump aims to exceed first term's weapon sales to Taiwan. Great thing to say when you're currently in negotiations, but let's throw another shrimp on the barbie, shall we? 2 weeks ago, China was in grave economic danger. Were they? That's what we're told. Is that just propaganda? Weren't we in grave economic danger as well when the market was tanking? Anyways, the very high tariff I set made it virtually impossible for China to trade with the United States marketplace, which is by far the #1 in the world. We went because we print money, right? We don't produce things, we just print money, and countries want that piece of paper because other countries want that piece of paper. It's a big pyramid scheme. We went, in effect, cold turkey with China, and it was devastating for them. Many factories closed, and there was, to put it mildly, civil unrest. Was there? I saw that was happening, and I didn't like it. For them, not for us, even though you did that to force their hand, if you believe that this is true. I saw what was happening and didn't like it. For them, not for us. I made a fast deal with China in order to save them from what I thought was going to be a very bad situation. And I didn't want to see that happen. Because of this deal, everything quickly stabilized and China got back to business as usual. Everybody was happy. That is the good news. The bad news is that China, perhaps not surprisingly to some, has totally violated its agreement with the US. So much for being Mr. Nice Guy. Uh-oh. Did the markets even react? Not really. The markets are taco right now. Trump always chickens out. That's the new acronym on the street. According to the White House, though, now he's making a major announcement that they're going to increase the steel industry imports tariffs to 50%. And that whole trade court of appeals, the trade court appeal to the trade court now has basically put the brakes on the suspension of the tariffs. So now the tariffs throughout the court process, who knows how long that's going to take, are still active. So we're still approaching this 90-day deadline for the reprieve in tariffs. And so we very well could see another flare-up. Look, this is the way it's going. When you have troops on the border of a country and your whole policy is Chinese containment, I mean, you have to understand this from China's point of view. They understand this is war. If anybody, like, look, imagine the shoe was on the other foot or the tables were turned. Okay? Imagine if China was in Mexico amassing a large military force on the American border, and they're saying our number one objective currently, our defense objective, is to contain America. Okay? Now, imagine how we would view that. Would we be swayed by the way they euphemistically try to describe it? No, they're preparing to subjugate and coerce China in order to maintain and remain the preeminent global superpower. So we would view that as a declaration of war. So don't be under any illusions as to what this is. This, in fact, is a declaration of war on China, which is why whether or not the tariffs are upheld is irrelevant. Trade between China and the United States is finished. Okay, now, there are major wildfires burning. As I indicated, I've never seen the smoke this bad. This is my drive to work this morning, and man, it was smoky. Like, it was to the point, we've had, since 2015, there's been smoke every year. And it's just progressively getting worse and worse. And now we're even getting into a La Nina, and it is still bad. We even have some wet weather, but these forests are still burning because they're so dry. There's so much dead standing timber as a result of invasive species like the pine beetle. That's what's completely decimating our forest up here in the boreal. In addition to above average temperatures, forestry mismanagement, a variety of things, humans living closer to the fault lines. But primarily, these forests don't burn unless the conditions are right for them to burn. If it was a normal level of precipitation, we wouldn't have these problems. Anyways, you're going to start seeing the fire smoke down in the United States very soon. Let me just play the animation here for you. So this is what you're going to see. So this is going to be tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And that smoke is going to make its way all the way down to New York. And so the jet stream carries the smoke. Let me just zoom out a bit for you here. So the jet stream carries the smoke from these fires. Now there's fires starting in Alberta, Saskatchewan, massive fires starting in Saskatchewan near a popular resort by Candle Lake. Now look at the size of this, okay? This is the size of the fire. Now this little lake, I'm not sure if you could see it. See, this is Candle Lake right here. You can't really see that. Why can't you see that? Is this not in focus? Oh shit, am I not focused here, guys? I apologize if I've spent this entire video unfocused. Anyways, Candle Lake, which you cannot see. Let me see if I can turn down the ISO a little bit here. No. Damn. That's weird. Okay, well anyways, maybe you can see it on there. It's this big, okay, and this is a massive lake. As far as lakes are concerned, maybe not so much in Canada, but it's a massive lake. This is like many times the size of Long Island. This is a massive area, and it's all descending on this major resort, so you need to have an evacuation plan. If you live near a forest, I've been saying this religiously for the last 4 years, you need to have an evacuation plan, and you need to know what you're going to throw in a car, because the winds today, we were seeing 50, 60 kilometer gusts. And when you have something like that happening in a fire, these fires just spread crazy fast. We've seen how fast they spread in California. That's the situation that we're seeing today. So if we play the tape forward a little bit, you can see that this smoke is going to be carried by the jet stream. And this is not entirely accurate. There's another program called Zoom Earth, which will show you the actual visual of the smoke. But these projections are usually fairly accurate, but you're going to see North America shrouded in smoke because, of course, we're only beginning the fire season and there's not a lot of moisture in the forecast. I just wanted to remind people that this is the tweet by the U.S. Department of Energy. AI is the next Manhattan Project and the United States will win. The question everybody needs to be asking right now, this is an AI video, by the way, I'll play it in the background, is why? Why do they feel so compelled to create artificial general intelligence? I mean, they're doing it in such a haphazard way, throwing complete caution to the wind, it appears, for the sake of what? Well, it's because it's the next weapon. Just like the U.S. Department of Energy said, it's the next Manhattan Project of this generation because they're trying to build a Wunderwaffe. They need a super weapon in order to compete with the Chinese. And because it's a tragedy of the common situation, nobody is thinking about the common good. Everybody is in an arms race. They're going to do it regardless. People are now saying, and I've been listening to a lot of AI experts talk about this, but many of these CEOs of these AI companies, and I'm going to be doing a dedicated video to this particular topic very soon, have as a prerequisite that they need to build their bunker before AI gets here. Now, why would you need, we're going to look at this instead, we'll look at that instead. I'd rather look at that than look at this guy. Why would you need to build a bunker before you invented AI? Because the idea that an all-seeing, all-knowing artificial intelligence is not going to be able to find you in a bunker, that can't be what they're preparing. They're not seriously preparing for the Terminator apocalypse, are they? They can't be. So what they're preparing for is World War III, because I think with the introduction of AI into the threat matrix, you have an increased likelihood that they're going to use nuclear weapons in what they'll perceive to be a far more calculated way that will increase their chances of success once everything is, plugged in to whatever sort of artificial intelligence. And it's all about military. So and somebody's going to do a video that's going to go viral pretty soon, and just remember where you heard it first. It's all about leveraging AI to be a master general. That's going to be the temptation with Skynet, is you have a certain amount of military assets, and can you position and utilize those assets in such a way to maximize their effectiveness? And AI is, when you input all the data into the system, it's going to spit out the recipe, the solution for how to do a decapitation strike on Russia and China without incurring massive counterstrikes. So how do we do counter force strikes, as it's called, which is essentially attempting to target Russia and China's ability to launch weaponry as opposed to hitting their primary targets? How do we do effective counter force strikes to minimize the retaliatory collateral damage? And the AI is going to be able to find the fastest route to that, and then they're going to be tempted to plug it all in, and then maybe that's when we get the Skynet scenario. But the bunker is not for the Terminator. It's not for Skynet. It's for World War III, humans leveraging AI for war. That's what it's for. Anyways, let's see what they have to say here. News popped up. All right. This is all AI, remember. This is funny. These videos get funnier by the day in a scary way.
for anyone who can afford me.
How will you know who?
What did she say?
I am a puppet for anyone who can afford me.
Ugh, the future is a weird place.
How will you know who to trust?
Boomers will believe anything I say.
I will sell you everything.
Every business will use me. Evil will abuse me.
I can be whoever you want me to be.
I am as real as you make me.
I'm just words some guy is typing to get a point across.
The old internet is dead. Oh!
I am your new best friend.
I don't know why they put this guy at the end. Yep. Usually when we make these big advances, like Google VO is now the thing, people will get tired of it. A year will go by and there'll be another leg up, beyond the uncanny valley, which we pretty much are at with most of this stuff. You can still point it out because it's still too perfect. What the AI has yet to do, why? God, what do we have to listen to this whole damn thing? Come on.
I am a
Okay. Where AI struggles is in its interpolation. So you know how, if you look at video games from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2, there was this huge leap in graphics. At least that's what it looks like. But then you look at PS2 to PS3 and it's like kind of, you can tell it's better, but it's not, like revolutionary better. PS4 to PS5, it's better, but you still can't quite tell. And it's because they're trying to interpolate down to the, atomic level of detail. So your eye can only see so much detail, but it's those fine details that you're unconsciously seeing, but you're perhaps not aware of when you're watching this, that makes it feel not real. It's too perfect. The AI still is too perfect. It hasn't mastered imperfection. And if you tell it to make something that looks rustic, it does it in this very surreal sort of way. So everything looks like the filters that people use to make themselves, look younger. That's what all this looks like. It looks too clean. But eventually they're going to get that interpolation down to a granular level. But from this point forward, it's going to be very hard to spot the difference. It's going to be like, PS4 versus PS5. Yeah, there's differences, but it takes a really trained eye to see the difference. And then one day you're going to get something like this. This is rendered in real time. Okay, this is the matrix I've warned people about. This is the future of gaming. This is using AI to create that virtual world, and it's very low res right now because this takes immense amounts of processing power. And honestly, I don't think they're going to be able to do this for a while, like as in 6 months. That's a while nowadays because, of course, we're entering into the singularity phase. And so this is what it looks like. So this is a virtual world being rendered in real time. And I can't remember what program this is, but that's what it is. It's so, you got to imagine the Matrix, right? The holodeck, but not just the holodeck. A holodeck which is alive in a sense, right? It's such that it's not like a game that you kind of go into and it's a bunch of fixed variables. It's evolving, it's changing. So this is where things get weird because the graphics on this actually, when you stand back and kind of blur your eyes a bit, they're not that bad. In fact, from a distance, that looks kind of real. But, this is where it's heading. They're going to get you in the virtual headset, and that's where you're going to spend your life. I mean, that looks real, man. That looks real, like from across the room. It looks like that new fisheye game, the police cam game that came out. That's crazy. That is crazy. Odyssey World. AI video, what does that say? called Odyssey World. Let me see this. How come I can't? When I download these videos and I try to show them to you guys, it doesn't let me go back. Anyways, check out Odyssey World. If you want to support the channel, go check out CanadianPreparedness.com. Check out our main channel, Canadian Prepper, for the more practical how-to advice. Because as fun as it is to muse about our demise, it's imperative that we actually get out there and do the work that we have to get prepared for what we talk about here. Thanks for watching, my friends. Have a great weekend. Canadian Prepper out.